quick run through the marking scheme. Very important that you understand how an examiner or anybody who's grading your work is going to look at your work, and I suppose anybody who sits down to write an essay or any kind of answer for Leaving Cert higher level English without fully understanding the marking scheme is making life difficult for themselves. So hopefully this will be nice and clear. So we know it's PCLM. You've heard those letters before. We know the allocation of marks are broken down: 30 for P, 30 for C, 30 for L, and 10 for M. We have to think about what these letters stand for, what they mean. So P is, of course, purpose. P is answer the question. It's interesting that when you look at the marking scheme, 70% of the marks are not going for what you say. They're going for how you say it. 30% of the marks are going for what you say. But because P is the bar, and you need to understand what that means, I'll explain it now. Because P is the bar, you can't access these marks, or your ability to access these marks, I should say, is limited by your success here. So in other words, if you take, for example, a poetry essay, if you score 11 out of 15 for purpose, which is the specifics of the question being answered in a thoughtful and informed manner, well, you haven't dropped 4 marks, you've dropped 12, because you cannot exceed the P mark in your C or L mark. So dropping just 4 marks in purpose, think about that, just do the maths on that. 50 take away 12 is 38. 38 multiplied by 2 is 76. So you're getting a H3. So purpose is absolutely vital. You have to think about the specific meaning of the question, the key words. Everything you say must be relevant to those key words and to the stimulus statement in the question. If you waffle, if you paraphrase, if you write summaries, you're wasting ink and you're wasting paper. Everything has to be purposeful or relevant. Okay, so that's really important. So when you're writing, you have to remember, we talked about this in class many times, that English is a skills exam and you're expected to be analytical and display evidence of critical thinking. So here's an example of a Shakespeare question. Discuss how Shakespeare's use of language, including imagery, plays an important part in developing our understanding of one of the following aspects of his play, let's say Hamlet. And this could be The Crucible, it could be All the Light We Cannot See. It's a very open, single text question from a past exam. Characterization, setting, and atmosphere. So there, you have to think there. You have to display knowledge of this playwright's use of language and imagery, 2 distinct but related things. And you have to be able to pick one of these 4 options, themes, characterization, setting, and atmosphere, and say how the language helps us understand those characters. In this case, I would pick the characters. So that's thoughtful engagement. Here we have a question on Adrienne Rich, which was quite difficult. Adrienne Rich, again, is a poet who's not on 2024, but the type of poetry she writes, which is, has that dual concern of being about her own life, but also about the society in which she lives, we might see that echoed in the poetry of Paul Meehan, for example. To what extent do you agree or disagree that Rich's or Meehan makes effective use of a diverse range of imagery and an engaging style to explore structures and values in society which she considers to be negative or destructive? So the first part was really easy, diverse range of imagery, engaging style, but you have to explain, show a range of imagery, establish that there's a diversity in the different images that she uses, explain what you understand engaging to mean in terms of a style, and give evidence of that engaging style, and then you have to tie that to this thematic part. So you're not just going in writing 4 summaries of 4 poems or 5 summaries of 5 poems. You have to tailor your knowledge to fit with your response to this question. And of course, it's a discursive task. So you can say, well, I agree in whole, or I agree in part, or I don't agree at all. As long as you're able to, establish the veracity or truth or accuracy of your point of view in a logical, evidence-based way, you're going to be rewarded. So it's really, really, really important that you understand what purpose is. Purpose is answer the specifics of the question. Great example is the personal essay, which is often quite popular with students. This is a very easy personal essay. I think it was from 2021. on the value of engaging in all kinds of learning and the pleasure, satisfaction and personal growth that can be derived from doing so. Gorgeous, simple personal essay. But what word do most people ignore? They ignore the word reflect. And, reflection in a personal essay is as vital an ingredient as eggs are in an omelette. And you read personal essays, well, they have the label personal essays, but they're not actually personal essays written by students, which are essentially just a collection of anecdotes with no, question-facing, thoughtful reflection or understanding of why the anecdote or how the anecdote is related to the topic under discussion. If you don't do that, you're not going to score purpose marks. So understand the question you're being asked, and answer the question, and you get your purpose marks. C is coherence of delivery. You look at the Chief Examiner's report. What do they talk about? Planning, paragraphing, and structure. You need to work on your structure. You need to work on establishing a BME. What does BME mean? A distinctive beginning, middle, and end, a sense of circular structure in an essay is something which will be rewarded. If the essay is disjointed, if it feels that it's written in an ad hoc fashion, and then, and there's no sense of continuity between points, you're going to lose coherence marks. If you show an ability and practice the ability to introduce efficiently, to conclude in a logical and concise fashion, to write effective, thoughtful, analytical paragraphs, then you're going to score well. So the coherence marks, you have to have a clear thesis in response to everything on paper 2, for example. And most of the tasks on paper 1 require a clear thesis. In other words, that's your response to the statement in the question. You need to think about paragraphing. There's a video here which explains the RIC rules, which is just my way of explaining how to write an effective paragraph. You should have points in each paragraph which are distinct, separate from the points in the paragraphs or the sections of the essay that precede them. But they should be connected. There should be some sense of bridging, the relay race, the passing of the baton between paragraphs. There has to be a sense of flow. And there's a nonsense belief that this just happens. It doesn't just happen. It's practice. It's looking at somebody showing you how to do it, and then putting it into practice. You've got plenty of time. And you need to think about that. Well, you don't need to, but if you want to improve, you should. Then we come to the bugbear of all bugbears, language. And the fact is that the vast majority of students struggle to articulate themselves in language which is clear, and then they complain. I can't do it. How can I improve? Well, I'm not being dismissive, but you need to read more. You need to read not only, in a wide sense, but you need to reread your own work. You need to read it out loud. You need to get somebody to read it back to you. You need to have the attitude that I don't want to let myself down. And if you want to know the one thing that could improve every student's work, well, not every, the top students have this under control, but the 90% of students who don't have this under control, the number one thing is punctuation. Students don't punctuate effectively anymore. That's a very general phrase. I probably shouldn't have said it, but it is something that I think most English teachers would agree, with which they would agree. So, sentences that are over long, sentences which actually don't make any sense, sentences where the addition of a colon or the addition of just a full stop and a capital letter for the next part would make the experience of reading the essay easier. And I'm sitting down, somebody's sitting down wherever they are next June, and they're reading your work. If you're making their work hard, if they can't read your work, it's nothing personal. You're going to lose marks in language. And if they can't read your work with ease, then of course that's going to impact upon your purpose mark as well. So these things are separate, but they are connected. They feed into each other. So that's what the language marks are going for. Keep your phrasing as clear as you can. If you're pitching at high grades, you need to be ambitious, but you should not be ambitious with your vocabulary unless you know what the words you're using actually mean. Too many students think that, they hear teachers say a word, they go, oh, that's a great word, I'm going to use that. But then they use it out of context, and instead of sounding intelligent, well, it doesn't send the right message. So, purpose, answer the question. Coherence, plan, organise and paragraph. Language, punctuate your work properly and try to be as clear as you possibly can. And then, of course, mechanics. Mechanics means spelling and also capitalization. So many students randomly capitalize words. There's this idea they don't use capitalization, but then there's other people who use it all the time. So, you are deducted marks for these kinds of errors. It's not something to worry hugely about, but just to be aware of. Spelling, if you have a waiver, you're fine. If you're somebody who struggles a bit with spelling, you're not going to be over-punished. Mechanics is only worth 10% of each answer. And in order to lose even one mechanics mark, you have to make 4 separate and distinct spelling mistakes. So, to lose, for example, all 5 mechanics marks in a poetry essay, you'd have to make 20 separate spelling mistakes across the essay. And that would be, in my experience, pretty rare. So that's the marking scheme. Make sure you understand the question you're being asked. Make sure everything you say is purposeful. Plan everything. Know how to introduce, conclude, and write effective development paragraphs. Have a look at the Rick Rules video that I posted ages ago. That might help with that, maybe. Write as clearly as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but you have to tailor your work to your ability. And the most important thing is that it's easy for me. Imagine me marking your script, or anybody marking your script, that's easy for me to read what you're saying. And careful with your spelling. Clean as you go, reread at the end of each paragraph. Remember, the final thing to say is here, practice against the clock. You have loads of time in this exam, but it can feel like you don't if you haven't practiced.